You can see from the photograph here, she's normally very careful about how she conducts herself in public. But as we also know, in the run-up to last year's election, she spent $100 million on community sport infrastructure grants that the Auditor-General said showed evidence of bias in their distribution to marginal seats, or ones they were after. It's what the press are calling sports rorts, but what I'd like to call sports. Darius Horsham, your department was a big supporter of Bridget McKenzie in the lead-up to her resignation. In fact, your minister is on record as saying...
Bridget McKenzie is a great minister who does a great job, and absolutely she has the support.
Now, in what way was she a great minister who did a great job?
If you define great as OK, and minister as that lady we had to give the job to because Barnaby is an idiot and had to resign, which meant we had to promote that other idiot to replace him, which meant we had to fill his position with someone, and also we have to have a certain number of ministers who are from the Nationals, and finding any that are sentient beings is difficult, then yes, she was a great minister.
Okay. And so by great job, you mean OK job?
No, we mean great as in great, but only if you redefine job to mean pork barrel in the electorate.
On that, can I draw your attention to the monitor?
Yes.
This is the Sport Australia funding schedule. It had about $30 million put in it after Scott Morrison announced the election, and then 2 months later, and a month before the election, that figure was more than tripled to over $100 million.
What's your point?
Well, I'm suggesting that the Community Sport Infrastructure Grant Program was knowingly and cynically used as an illegal slush fund.
How dare you! It was knowingly and cynically used as a perfectly legal slush fund. Bridget was the sports patsy.
Minister.
It was within her rights to ignore 73% of Sport Australia's recommendations and give the money to marginal and targeted electorates.
What about topping up the slush fund twice before the election? Isn't that a monstrous breach of trust with the Australian people?
Well, Ros Kelly from Labor did something similar that time.
Yes, and she admitted her wrongdoing when she resigned.
Well, times have changed. Expectations are much lower now.
Where did you even get $100 million?
It was easy. People couldn't navigate the NDIS. We didn't increase New Start.
Yeah, but hang on.
Listen, Bridget's a pork barrel half-full type of person, you know? So she sees that and she tops it up with more pork till it's full. She stuffs it in. Get in there, she yells to the pork as she crams it in with some sort of paddle. In fact, there is so much pork, she has to go and get a bigger barrel, and like Brody says in Jaws about the boat. So she gets this colossal barrel filled to bursting with pork with a shower nozzle so she can rain down the money on the various electorates that we need to bribe so they can vote for us so we can stay in power. What is so morally objectionable about that?
Hold that thought. Of course, it's not only ministers who supported the former sports and now former agriculture minister, Senator without portfolio Erica Betts.
Ministers are not the ventriloquist doll of the department.
And if they were, you'd expect them to be a lot more convincing than that. Thank you very much, Darius.
Fantastic.
But Bridget had been getting a lot of support, not only from fellow ministers and backbenchers, but also barely in the chamber people like the Nationals' Barnaby Joyce and Michelle Landry. Barnaby helped by saying, "She will keep her job. I have been taking bets with people. She will keep her job. She will see it through." Now, Barnaby is seldom wrong. Even when he made a prediction about his own career and said 6 days before he was forced to resign, "I'm not going anywhere," he was kind of right. As for Michelle Landry, she has said that Bridget was Deputy Leader of the Nationals and she believes she would remain in that position. Now, in fairness, how things end up and in what position has never been Michelle's strong suit.
If we do not exploit our natural advantages, we will fail as a nation and be relegated to the annals of history as the nation that wasted a continent.
Now, regardless of who came out in support of Bridget, she's gone as a result of the report put together by Prime Minister and Cabinet Secretary Phil Gaetjens, whose investigations revealed she had breached ministerial standards. Feng Shui advisor to the Minister for Government Services, Dramela Burt. Bridget's supporters have made the undisputed and irrelevant point that all the clubs receiving the grants were eligible, but surely the question is, To what extent was the Prime Minister's office involved in circumventing Sport Australia's independence?
Well, Sean, all those sports clubs were eligible for funding.
Yes, well, that's an answer to a different question, though, isn't it?
Which you failed to ask. I mean, I'm here to provide you with answers, Sean. How about you do your job and find the questions that go with them?
What about the colour-coded spreadsheet from the former Minister's office outlining which marginal and targeted seats they were going to get the money?
Girls shouldn't have to change behind the building, Sean. They should be able to change in it.
Again, I haven't asked you anything that would even remotely invite that answer.
Well, if you want to live in your own little fantasy world with your head in the sand and just obstinately keep asking the wrong questions, regardless of what answers I give, there's not much I can do about it, is there?
What about the $1 million fast track to shooting clubs and the $160,000 report about the economic and social benefits of firing guns?
Well, would you rather the girls change behind a tree? Or in a car?
Yes, well, that doesn't answer my question, does it?
Sean, people are sick of political interviewers avoiding the right questions. They're sick of it.
What about the email that directly implicates the Prime Minister's office?
Jenny and I just want to congratulate the states on the great job they've been doing.
Is there any point to interviewing any of you?
We'll be looking at that at the appropriate time, and we'll continue to be looking at that at the appropriate time, and that's what we're doing.
Well, that could be the answer to any number of questions.
None of which you seem to want to ask.
Dre Mandelbert, what's the point?
Wholemeal crumpets.
Well, particularly you typical ABC viewers are being very unfair to our PM, and I'd like to defend him, if I may, with a little bit of plain speaking. Now, everyone seems to be looking around for someone we can blame for our lack of a national coordinated energy and climate policy. Anthony Albanese blames the government's sloth. I didn't even know we had one. Albo then went on to say...
There's been a decade wasted by the coalition.
Well, I take my hat off, along with my compression socks, to a coalition that can waste a decade in just 6 years of government. If we had that sort of efficiency and productivity in the business sector, our economy would be riding high. But it's not as if there isn't hope. As the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, said...
We are going to continue to evolve our policy in this area to reduce emissions.
And by saying they will evolve climate change policy, presumably he's ruling out the possibility of intelligent design. Now, you might be thinking, do we have billions of years to wait for natural selection to play out in the Liberal Party room? Well, the thing is, as Scott said, there's no point shutting down our coal-fired power plants and coal mines because...
Other countries will just buy the coal from somewhere else.
Exactly. It's like ICE or child pornography. You close down one meth lab or one online site and people are just going to go somewhere else. So why bother doing the right thing at all? And the fact of the matter is that the PM has been helping people. He's even been willing to help people shake his hand when they can't bring themselves to do it. Because the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, knows exactly what people need at the moment.
What people need now is what people need now.
I mean, it's hard to argue with that, isn't it? Mainly because he'd talk over you if you tried. As Prime Minister, he's also been exercising all the skills that got him sacked from Tourism Australia so he could go on to become our Prime Minister in the first place. Scott contacted the US State Department to personally gaslight them so they would downgrade their travel warning to Australia from exercise increased caution to exercise normal precautions. You know, don't be freaked out when the toilet swirls the other way. Our football is weird. Remember to bring a snake venom kit. And all this was very helpful because until the PM's intervention, American tourists were being advised to postpone their trips. People from all around the world simply weren't coming here, not only because of the bushfires, but also because they'd probably seen this ad. But the PM is saying that we're open for business. Come on over, unless you're from China, obviously.
Australia is open. Australia is still a wonderful place to come and bring your family and enjoy your holidays.
And who better to send this message about not postponing your holidays because of the bushfires than someone who refused to postpone his own holidays because of the bushfires? And incidentally, a shout-out, if I may, to those of you out there who've made donations. I know it's not a competition or about how famous you are, but Chris Hemsworth, if you're watching, $1 million, fantastic. And Elton John might still be in the country. I don't know, I'm not a big fan. $1 million, well done. Thank you, Elton. Also, BHP. Well done. $2 million. That's twice as much as Chris and Elton's individual donations, which is fair enough because when you think about it, Chris and Elton's combined contribution to global warming would be about the same as BHP's. Anyway, as I say, it's not about who gives the most, but the winner has got to be Chairman of Fortescue Metals, Twiggy Forrest, with $70 million. Now, Bluey Curlicue from Fortescue Metals, that's an astonishingly generous amount of money for bushfire relief.
Well, 10 million is going to bushfire relief. Most of it is actually going on how to cope with these sorts of bushfires in the future.
Still, 10 million. Very generous. Not quite as generous as 70, but, you know, still pretty impressive.
Twiggy will do whatever he can to help deal with the effects of these fires, many of which were deliberately lit.
Would he recommend Fortescue Metals consider a levy per tonne of its iron ore, which is sintered and smelted by coal in furnaces, which are also deliberately lit?
That'd be billions of dollars.
Yeah, sure, it'd be enormously helpful in terms of rebuilding and ensuring resilience.
Listen, why should industry spend billions of dollars from its profits when a $70 million tax-deductible donation to a charity run by the donor from his dividends, most of which will be spent researching how to cope with the climate crisis we're contributing to, will look much better?
But it's just dealing with the consequences, not the cause.
If arsonists didn't light fires in the first place, there wouldn't be any. It's as simple as that. It's like tobacco. Just because someone makes cigarettes and sells them to you and encourages you to smoke them and enjoy that cool, clean taste doesn't mean they're responsible when you get cancer. The responsibility lies with whoever lights a cigarette or passively inhales their fumes.
Yes, but
Twiggy is doing something good and decent. For you to sit there and suggest he's trying to trade off how he makes his money with how he spends some of it, or that he's somehow trying to polish the turd that is the reputation of the mining industry, well, that's just cynicism on your part.
So this isn't even Twiggy trying to feel less guilty about climate change?
Absolutely not. Listen, if Australia is Europe during the Middle Ages and the mining industry is a rat, then Twiggy is the plague-infested flea on that rat, living off it as it goes about its business and inadvertently wiping out 3/5 of the population. If that flea then offers to help formulate a plan to cope with the next outbreak of bubonic plague, you'd be a fool not to accept it.
Well, thank you, Bluey, and for coming on tonight and helping us out. Please accept this P2-way Aussie face mask, courtesy of Mad as Hell. The P2-way is the only way to keep the smoke out and the coronavirus in. That's nice. And now...